Welcome to the Ken Hill Podcast. Once again, I appreciate everyone taking the time to tune in. And before we jump into the topic for this podcast, and trust me, we're going to get into it, I want to take a minute or two and chat about sort of how this particular podcast topic has come up. And this one, you're probably going to hear a little bit more emotion with me in this one because I've been involved with a lot of stuff the last month or so, and a lot of it hasn't been positive with our sport. Meaning, I've been involved with some of our racing clubs on why our crashing is going up, why we're having issues in our sport. Same thing with our track days, why we're having more red flags at our track days, and why are some of those reasons. You're going to detect a little bit of frustration in my voice when it comes to this, because having ridden at a bunch of track days this last month and seeing the quality of riding, as well as having been on multiple race weekends where the racing hasn't gotten through almost an entire day without a race being red flagged, that part of it is disheartening for me. When I'm working at some of these track days, or I'm working at some of these Moto America weekends, it's frustrating for me to see where some of the training or where some of the information is going in our sport right now. And this is one of the crazy things about, we've got this free economy called the internet that allows us to have all this information out there. And my methodology and where my training comes from is, it's the culmination of 20 some odd years of training riders. And we know what works and we know what does not work. Having to field questions or having to field lines of thinking that I see as so wrong and so far out in left field does get a little bit frustrating. It's funny, the simplicity of what we're going to talk about today has really come home and has been super apparent in just the last months with two particular examples. I'm going to give you those examples now. The first one is with JD Beach. JD Beach, is multi-time 600cc champion here in the U.S. And this year is doing double duty on flat track as well as a super bike. JD went to go test at Buttonwillow not that long ago, just over a month or two ago, and still getting used to the super bike. And so, before days that he's testing, we're communicating and chatting about it. And so he says, okay, what am I working on? They have some stuff on the bike they're working on, but what am I working on? So with JD, we said, okay, JD, you know what? Let's make sure we're getting back to square one, right, with our fundamentals, and your initial laps. And I'm not going to get into what his particular triggers are or why. But let's make sure that we're using the track correctly on your opening set. So your opening laps, we're going to go a tick slower to work on our precision at the beginning, and let's see what happens. And basically, I got a text later on that morning that says I did my first session and ended up as fast as I ended my last time here on the super bike. I ended up being just as quick as I was before in the opening laps because I basically didn't rush, had the bike in the right place, and had very good bike placement. That routine for him was then the trigger for everything else that day to go well. Same thing with another rider that we have, rider on our RIC team, Hayden Gilchrist. Hayden, obviously super, super quick. And the more that we build Hayden's routine, more we build his routine of what he does in his opening laps, and the feeling that he gets from those opening laps sets the stage for the rest of his day. Because if we get into a situation where with him, if he's either rushing the entry, fades into the corners, ends up with weight on his arms, we spend basically the next day and a half erasing that feeling and erasing what he was struggling with instead of being in a proactive state. So this podcast is about routines. And what is a routine? Why do they matter? And how you can put your routine together on the track. So as we get into this, let's define a routine, right? A routine is a set of fixed actions that you follow regularly. So why do we do this? Because it removes or limits variables. It allows you to focus on what really matters. And when you look at how you develop a routine, they're developed from trial and error, and they naturally prioritize the order of importance. So when you get up in the morning, you have a routine. Go to bed at night, you have a routine. Go to work, you have a routine. You load your trailer or truck, you have a routine. So think about it. Why are you doing this? Because it takes all the things that are important and you focus on those, and things that aren't important, you don't think about. And again, when you're developing a routine, the order of the routine it literally organically happens based on order of importance. There's a really hidden factor in here, which even though you're doing it, and you're doing it when you're establishing these routines, and when you're doing these routines every day, this is the fact. This is the hidden gem in here that we don't spend enough time with. And the hidden factor is having a routine allows you to identify issues more quickly. You end up with report cards. They organically form so you can identify when something is right or not right. When something's not right, it automatically sticks out like a sore thumb, right? It's like this gigantic, no pun intended, waving red flag. This is why we put routines together in our life. But the thing that I'm finding on track is we don't build a routine when we get on our motorcycle. You might have a routine when you get to put your pit together. You've got your routine getting your bike ready, take it off stands, go for a street ride. But when we ride, we don't have a routine. Instead, we're focused on doing something great. We're focused on whatever our best lap time is and how quickly can I get down to my best lap time. We don't realize all the things that happen to get down to, of course, that lap time, or whatever the outside factors are that may be preventing you at that moment from that lap time, whether it's conditions, weather, tires, grip, blah, 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 all those different things. So we want to put ourselves in a position to be great, but think about that. Before you can be great, you have to be good. How do you get good? By doing something over and over again and putting your reps in, because it goes back to what we said, right? What is the hidden factor in that? Because it allows you to identify these issues more quickly and also more pointedly, right? Because if you're trying to do, it's the saying of, you're trying to do 100 things an inch deep. Well, what we're trying to do things here is we're trying to do, a couple of things, 10 feet deep. And I know it's tough because it's trying to do the same thing over and over again isn't really sexy. Everybody wants to do, the fun things that are, the new things that are, supposedly fun and they're super refreshing. And yeah, what isn't sexy is doing the same thing over and over again, but you're doing it deliberately so you can make it better and make it more precise. So let's take you through it. Let's build your routine. Let's put together your routine on your bike and let's get your system going. I'll start off with talking about this routine. And when I ride, whether I'm doing two-up rides, whether I'm riding for myself, though I don't get to do much of that anymore, though it is fun to be able to go run some laps and work on my stuff as well. My routine happens in about a lap, maybe 2 laps, depending on what's going on, or if I'm riding an unfamiliar bike or whatever it is. But this is something that as you develop your routine, you're going to spend maybe a single day working on these things. It's funny, again, I'll sidebar with this, with a story with Hayden. One of the things that working on with Hayden is some specific body position timing and body position issues that turn in. And here's Hayden Gillam obviously incredibly fast 600 rider, very competent also, obviously on a 1,000cc bike. And we had him working on one thing at a set of our RIC days, one thing for 3 days. And we didn't let his lap timer be his report card. So going and riding, a lap timer absolutely is a report card of how you're doing. But it wasn't the report card that I wanted him to work on. He got a lap timer at basically the last 2 hours of the third day. We let him have a lap timer because I wanted his report cards to be something that he could feel subjectively on the bike and be able to say, how am I doing? How am I doing? This is the report card feeling I want. And if I get those things right, well, of course, then the lap time will come. So you have to put your reps in. You want to get great, you've got to be good first. So you have to put those reps in. I know people don't want to hear that. They want, the silver bullets, and they want it. For instance, when we talk about braking, it's like, well, Ken, how did you develop your talk on brake timing and brake pressure and your brake graph? Took me about 2 years of working on my braking to make that happen. So yeah, you want to be great. Let's work on good. So there is a caveat to this, however. You're not going to be able to do this alone. You aren't going to be able to recognize what you need or when you need it to be able to build that routine, to be able to build your plan. A JD Beach or Hayden Gilchrist, they know a lot about this sport, but they're not going to be able to recognize those intricate little things that are going to get them their next steps. They're not going to be able to build their plan or their routine. Instead, they need somebody, and in this case, I'm the one who's going to be able to look at that for them and say, hey, look, we're going to spend this time working on whatever it is, our braking or our body or our eyes or mapping out, sitting down with a piece of paper and mapping out those reference points. So let's continue to think about those next steps for yourself with professional objective coaching. You're not going to be able to get this by watching YouTube videos. So routines on your motorcycle. You know what it is? This is what the order of the sport is all about. So when you're going to go ride, the first routine that you're going to look at is your bike placement. Bike placement. So when you go and ride, let's make sure you're putting the bike in the right place at the right time. Let's identify what exit direction looks like. Let's identify where the bike is on the entry so you can have a better exit. So the first part of your routine is your bike placement. It all starts there because, again, that is our goal. Second one, vision and focus. Specifically with vision and focus is your reference points. And let's make sure we're establishing our reference points. We're going to do a quick one on that is, what are the 5 reference points? Your exit apex, your entry apex, your slow point of the corner, or where you're releasing the brake, your turn-in point, and then where you apply the brakes. So there's a routine for you. Do you have established reference points? If you're struggling in a section of the track, guess what? You don't have a reference point. You haven't identified where you're at or what you should be doing at that point. And remember now, if our eyes are engaged, our technique is engaged. So if you don't have a reference, you don't have a technique to apply it to. So bike placements first. Let's get our vision and focus and our reference point second. Let's make sure that's our routine. We're establishing that. Third one, motor controls. It starts with my first 5% of brakes and my last 5% of brakes. So I'm starting with my motor controls. I'm making sure that I'm not going to go out there and rush and just grab the brakes or let the brake off. I'm trying to establish my initial brake pressure so I can have good end of braking as well as my slow point. So motor controls, the first 5%, so you can have a good last 5%, so you can have a good slow point. So the third routine we're looking at is our motor controls. And this one goes right into the fourth one, which is our brake adjustability. My routine is I want to start adjusting my brake pressure for the given corner. So If it's a corner that requires really good straight up and down braking, I'm going to start applying really good straight up and down braking. I'm just not going to throw my brain out and, oh yeah, I'm going to have really good straight up and down braking everywhere, because maybe that's not what the corner has. Or, oh, hey gosh, I'm just going to have really light and long brakes everywhere. No, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to have longer and lighter braking at the right time. So brake adjustability. Start figuring out, okay, where am I letting off the brakes? And is that what that corner radius, does my brake graph for that corner radius, is that appropriate? And now, as my speed starts to come up, because your speed's naturally going to come up when you start doing these other things, and you can start working on your turn-in point and your turn-in rate. Because as you go quicker, your turn-in point's got to be earlier, and your turn-in rate as well. It's going to have to start being a little bit quicker as well, but you can start to take a look at that. Then as my speed naturally starts to come up from these things, I start looking at my body position, because I'm going to start running more lean angle. If I start running more lean angle, I've got to make sure I'm using my body not only at the right time, but to help mitigate that lean angle. And a great report card for that for myself and my riding is, am I able to lighten up my inside arm at turn in? Make sure I'm not so cranked on brake pressure and I'm not riding so tight, that we're getting locked up on the bike. So that's my routine. And again, because I've worked on my routine, I'm doing this in a lap. I'm doing this in a lap. I'm doing this in a lap and a half. And while that's great, you may work all day on one of these things at first. Great, because you got to put your reps in. There's no other way to do it. You have to put your reps in. And I'm sorry if it's not sexy, but you want to get great. Well, let's work on getting you good first. And there's times where the nice thing about this is then you can go back through this. Right? And this literally should be every time that you go out, you should have this routine. This shouldn't be I'm going to do this in the morning and forget about it. If I'm going to go work on something specific in my own riding, I'm going to make sure that all of these are established first. So one of the things I'm personally working on in my own riding right now is I'm working on my throttle graph. But I'm not going to work on my throttle graph until all of these other things are complete. Because these are the fundamentals of my riding. This is where I want to be so I can work on my initial throttle graph or my throttle graph. Only then that's going to happen. So routines. We have routines all in the rest of our life. So go think about that, right? Go back and think about how have you built these routines. And again, it's through trial and error. It's through what works and what doesn't. We need this routine so we can get good. And then from there, we can start to get great with everything. Copyright 2019, Ken Hill Coaching, all rights reserved.